the what not to do. Learners and participants may come at us with a thicker shell or a softer shell, right? So, we don't get to decide for them how they like their feedback. But I'm sure that you've been witness to learners either in the clinical environment or the sim space where someone is giving them feedback that is not meant to be productive. It is meant to be, let me show you where your place is and exists, right? So it's meant to reinforce a hierarchical environment. So if we're trying to tell our learners that it's safe in that environment, and we're trying to teach them how to have difficult conversations in the clinical environment, but they've been beaten down and felt unsafe in the clinical environment, obviously they're going to be a little more reluctant to engage and participate in what we're trying to set up as that safe learning environment. So all we can do is establish the expectations and, try to be upfront. I haven't met a learner yet who wasn't more willing to roll up their sleeves, have their heart rate go up when I said something to the effect of, I'm going to really challenge you today because I care and because I want to make sure that you provide safer patient care.
The only point I was trying to get at when it comes to assessments, it's being transparent, letting the learner know what the assessment's going to be used for, set their expectations, and also know who's going to see it and what it means. Because as you know, sometimes these assessments are high stakes. They may mean promotion to the next level when you're talking about medical students or even residents that they need to perform to a certain level before they can move on. That's why we love mastery learning so much, right? Is because you can go again and again and again. One thing I did want to talk about is what we say during simulations as facilitators and how what we say is so important for, again, we're going to put in quotations, creating the safest learning environment possible. So I just experienced a sim where an instructor / facilitator was doing an assessment on a trainee, and at the end of the assessment said, well, looks like you failed. We're going to schedule another time for you to come back to the sim center. And that is an example of a way not to give feedback, right? So it could be anything. It's how you're doing this wrong. You mentioned that before. If I say to a learner hierarchically, you are doing this wrong, let me show you. Or even worse, I grab your hand, right? And I direct it to the right place to cut or to put a clamp. So what strategies do you use or do you think are good that we can become better facilitators? Because certainly the facilitator wants to be the best they can be, and they just may not be trained in the proper way to give feedback or to interact with the participant.
So when you were providing some examples of what not to do, you did this wrong, you failed, we'll schedule another time. Those are not opportunities for feedback and for learning. So certainly Jenny Rudolph, CMS, talking about advocacy and inquiry, that whole premise is built upon facilitation, facilitated discussion, right? So that language has been around for a long time. If you're trying to get someone's ire up, right? You did this, you did that. That's accusatory language. It's going to put a learner on the defensive. It's going to put any human being on the defensive. So that's not what we're trying to do. So if you're going to use those words, learners are going to be on the defensive. To me, the reason advocacy, inquiry, facilitated discussion works is because you are observing a behavior, asking for reflections or thoughts of, why a learner got to a certain place. And then either asking the learner to reflect upon that a little bit further, or sometimes answering a question or filling a gap.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, this form of debriefing goes a long way in your personal life too, I think, when we, in general, are giving feedback and we frame it as I noticed, it tends to let the person know you're open to their perspective. That was what you noticed, but that's not really what happened. And I can't tell you how many times I've learned from the learner because of that template that I will swear by. And then there's also, when you do team training, the big debrief afterwards. Are there any particular strategies you use to encourage people to speak up during the big debrief?
Absolutely. Again, that's part of setting the stage. I think it is very important to ensure that all of your participants have a say in the debriefing experience. One of my favorite things to do is to set the expectation that the end of the debriefing will conclude with going around the room to have every participant share something that resonated with them, whether or not that's something that they feel they'll take to the clinical environment, or something that they learned, or something about the teamwork, communication, the knowledge, anything that happened during the session. One of my friends and mentors always used to say to me, leave them with the last word. So I try to make sure that those final words really are a shared experience of the learners.
So during the big debrief, how do you ensure a safe learning environment where you could have learners pointing fingers, he or she did this during the simulation, and, keeping it with mutual respect during the debrief?
I think that the process of the debrief helps facilitate success with the debrief. So you can read a group's body language. It's really important to establish those feelings up front. You can always get a read of the room, certainly, if you're doing a, one word, how are you feeling? I actually used to have a feelings chart in my simulation center, those happy, sad, angry faces, because sometimes people couldn't really put a word to how they were feeling. So, obviously, if you're going around the room and someone picks the head exploding, then maybe you need to spend a little bit more time on that and diffuse that situation before you create any circumstances where learners were going to unleash on each other.
So that's the first thing you do, is you say, where are you guys on the feeling chart?
Yeah, I mean, so yes, where are you on the feeling chart? If going around the room, if you were going to describe how that felt, how you feel, what would it be like?
Yeah, that's the first question, right? Is how did that feel?
To set the stage for debriefing, I actually use a modified debriefing style where I incorporate my learners as assistant debriefers. I always have someone else watching in addition to me, right? So when this is a big group, right? So oftentimes I would, the learners that I would have would be a large group of learners. So I set the stage in the beginning. We don't say things that are negative. This is all meant to be constructive. It's Vegas rules, right? So I have them write on a board the plus, the delta, and what we're going to talk about during the debriefing session. So it's, what did they set up? What are the opportunities for improvement? Because we're never negative. We're not to bash. We're just making observations about what could be improved. And then sometimes, even though the simulation, a session may be around certain learning objectives, maybe there's something else that's more important that you want to talk about. Maybe there's a tangent that you want to explore. That's what we're going to discuss, those topics. So I would say the greatest success, and I actually think that had a tremendous impact in the clinical environment, because it is setting the expectation, and I call it over a generation, of getting and receiving feedback. So getting and giving feedback. So I like sharing the expectation that everyone's not only going to participate in a debrief, but everyone's going to assist in the debrief. And then I always end it with the last words, those learners having the opportunity to get the last word in.
Right on. I mean, the only thing I would add is that during the setting of the stage, I reiterate some of the things I did in the pre-brief. This is an area where we're going to reestablish the confidentiality agreement of the Vegas contract. And we're going to, again, be transparent about the goals for what we're trying to achieve in the debriefing session. And this is not about individuals. It's about performance. So we don't talk about Sharon, you did this, or Joe, you did this. We talk about overall performance and how we can improve. And again, it's like now we have to relearn the way we think about words we're commonly used. Like the term fail doesn't exist anymore, right? It's more thought of as an opportunity to do it again and get better. And we've erased the word remediation for the same reason out of our vocabulary because of the negative connotation.
And again, I think making sure that the learners have the expectation and they know of what your intentions are as an educator and facilitator. I have never gone wrong with the honest and transparent notion that I just really care about them as clinicians. One of the most important things as well as I'm entering the debrief is after we go through kind of a reactions or a feelings phase, it's most important to me that we have someone summarize the case and make sure that everyone is on the same page.
Sharon, I always enjoy talking to you because I'm more of by the book now, and you've kind of taken the book and developed your own little ways of doing things that are so innovative and cool. So thanks so much for sharing. I always learn when we talk.
Me too. I think that one of the things about our relationship I've really enjoyed is that we do push each other's envelopes all the time. As we're getting close to wrapping this up, I think we have a lot more to talk about, and I'd love it if you would invite me back. There are a couple of things that I really would like the listeners to remember. First, just because we say that a simulation environment is safe, psychologically safe, does not make it so. Safety is and always will be in the hearts and the minds of our learners. And lastly, true psychological safety, based on the enormous work by Amy Edmondson and her team, is, as you said, about trust and mutual respect. I think the most powerful thing we talked about today is learners knowing that I really care about how they will take care of patients in the clinical environment. They really want to get better. SIM is the place to do it. My learners always have known that I want to help them be the best that they can be. Truly, they'll be the ones out there taking care of us and our loved ones in the future. As facilitators, educators, and debriefers, we can't fake it. We can't weaponize feedback. It destroys psychological safety. I am going to read this last quote from Maya Angelou to end. As the amazing Maya Angelou said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
Wow, Sharon, that was actually amazing. And with that, I think we should end here. To our listeners, thank you for listening today. In our next podcast, we will continue to discuss